In May 1945, a German general sat on the wooden cot of a makeshift Allied prison. The walls were gray, bare, and cold, the floor slick with months of troop traffic, the air thick with tension. General Friedrich Adler had commanded entire divisions in France, in Poland, in Belgium. He had witnessed the grinding machinery of war, the chaos of cities under occupation, the screams of civilians, and yet he had survived. Until this moment, he had always assumed survival meant cunning, obedience, and ruthless efficiency. The door opened with a metallic clang. Adler braced for the final act he had rehearsed for 3 days' execution by firing squad. The uniformed figure who entered carried authority unmistakable, stars gleaming on the collar, polished boots clicking on the stone floor. The smell of gun oil and leather filled the cell. "General Adler," the man said, his voice calm but firm. A salute followed, sharp, deliberate, precise. Adler froze, every instinct screamed. This was a trick. A final humiliation. The officer stepped forward. "You will be escorted to officer quarters immediately. You have been assigned an aid and bathing facilities." Adler's voice cracked, disbelief spilling out. I do not understand. After everything." The American officer lowered his salute. "You are a general officer. You will be treated as such until a court determines otherwise. Politics is for politicians. I fight soldiers. Soldiers, I respect, even in opposition. Fanatics, I put down." Adler's mind reeled. Respect from an enemy. He had prepared for hatred, for vengeance, for the bitterness of a world that knew the horrors he had seen and reported, and failed to stop. His aide, a young captain fluent in German, stood silently by the door. Adler's hands trembled as he followed the officer out. Each step down the hall echoed in the cavernous prison, each click of boots a reminder that his life had shifted from enemy combatant to prisoner, but not as he had imagined. The quarters were modest, yet clean. Steam rose from the bath, a luxury Adler had not known in months. He removed his uniform carefully, inspecting the small shrapnel scars on his arms, the pale lines of sleepless nights etched across his face, the hands that had given orders, signed reports, and hesitated where courage was required. The razor gleamed in the lamplight. Not yet. First, he needed to understand the situation. Dressed in civilian clothes, his aide had provided gray slacks, a simple jacket. Adler followed him to the officers' mess. The room was filled with Allied officers, Americans, British, and French. Many had spent years fighting the Wehrmacht. Conversation halted as he entered. Eyes tracked his movements like artillery finding range. A British colonel, chest covered in medals, stared with undisguised hatred. Then the American officer entered. The room snapped to attention. He gestured toward Adler. "Gentlemen, this is General Friedrich Adler, formerly of the Wehrmacht. He will dine with us tonight." The senior officer's table stretched the length of the room. An empty chair sat at the head, clearly reserved for Adler. Murmurs rippled across the room. A British colonel rose, indignation etched on his face. "Sir, with respect, this is an outrage." Patton's voice, steel gray and calm, cut through the tension. "General Adler is here under military protocol. Objections can be taken to Eisenhower. Otherwise, finish your meal elsewhere." The colonel hesitated, then stalked out. Silence returned. Adler approached the table, his legs numb. An American major handed him a plate. Actual food, not rations. Roasted chicken, potatoes, and vegetables. Hunger twisted in his stomach, mingled with nausea and disbelief. Patton carved his food with meticulous precision, then addressed him directly, voice neutral, factual. "You commanded the 15th Army in France. During the occupation, you filed multiple reports about atrocities committed by SS units under your purview. 17 formal complaints. Is that correct?" Adler swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. Reports filed. Ignored. Reassigned. No action taken." Most officers did not file any complaints, Patton said. Most pretended not to see. That is why you are here to testify. Your actions will be evaluated, legally and morally. Until then, you are an officer in our custody. Eat, rest, prepare for what comes next. The weight of the words sank in. He had expected hatred, derision, perhaps punishment. Instead, he was shown a form of respect that struck him deeper than any bullet ever could. This recognition was not forgiveness, it was not absolution. It was the acknowledgement that he had once been a soldier, a man shaped by a code he had failed to uphold fully, but that code, now, mattered again. The meal continued in tense silence. An American lieutenant, barely more than a boy, approached. "Sir, I am Lieutenant Patterson, part of your escort tomorrow." Adler nodded, expecting reproach. "My brother died in Normandy," Patterson said quietly. "I was ready to hate you, but your reports, you tried, even if they failed, that counts for something." Adler's throat tightened. Respect from those he had once fought against it was heavier than any punishment. It revealed every failure, every hesitation, every moral compromise. Yet it also offered a lesson. Honor existed independently of victory or loyalty to a flag. The next morning, Adler was escorted to a small, bare interrogation room. The walls were colorless, the table plain, the chair hard and unyielding. A single overhead bulb cast long shadows across the floor. Lieutenant Colonel Warren, a seasoned American prosecutor, sat already behind the table, papers neatly arranged, pen poised. He looked tired, balding, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but there was no malice in his gaze, only precision. "General Adler," Warren began, voice even, neutral, "we will go through the timeline again. Starting with your first complaint regarding SS activities in occupied France." Adler nodded. His hands rested on the wooden table, fingers intertwined. "October 1940, first complaint regarding the occupation in northern France. Reports of civilian executions, deportations, and reprisals against partisans." "And those complaints?" Warren asked, sliding a document across the table. "Acknowledged and ignored. They were acknowledged, verbally, reassigned to paper. No action taken." Adler's voice was flat, almost mechanical, rehearsed through sleepless nights. He had repeated these details countless times in his mind, in his cell, in silent reflection. The words were catechism now, memorized like prayers he did not believe in. Warren's pen moved steadily, noting dates, references, and chains of command. General von Keitel received them. Hitler himself likely saw some. "And yet you continued to serve for 5 more years. Why?" Adler paused, the question like a lance through his chest. He had asked himself this same question 1,000 times. "Every day, Colonel," he admitted, "every day, I considered resigning. But I told myself, a soldier does not abandon his post. Germany needed good officers to counterbalance the madness. I could do more good from inside the system." Warren's pen stopped. "And did you?" Adler's eyes dropped to the table. "No, I was a coward. I chose duty as I understood it, career, self-conception, honor over what was right. Thousands died under my authority because I chose comfort over courage." A silence fell, heavy, almost sacred. Warren leaned back, thoughtful. "That is quite an admission. The only one that truly matters." The interrogation continued for hours. Dates, orders, reports, evidence of atrocities, the meticulous architecture of genocide laid bare through the lens of military bureaucracy. Each document Adler handled was a mirror reflecting the system he had served and the evil it enabled. He traced his finger over transportation orders, authorizations for SS operations, lists of villages, deportations, and executions. His signature, once a mark of authority, now felt like a brand of guilt. Yet throughout, the Americans maintained a precise professionalism. No threats, no torture, no shouting. The weight of accountability was in the quietness of protocol, in the meticulous documentation of fact, not in the violence of vengeance. They treated him correctly, formally, as an officer even as they documented his failings. After 2 hours, Adler was allowed to return to his quarters. His aide met him quietly at the door. "Sir, proper protocols are being maintained. They call every few days to ensure you are treated correctly. Why would they care?" Adler asked, bitterness threaded through exhaustion. "Above my pay grade, sir," the aide replied. "But they do." Adler walked slowly to his bed, stripped the day's dust from his skin in the warm bath, and stared at the small razor on the counter. Its weight felt heavier than ever, a reminder that judgment, whether by court or conscience, would not be deferred. Respect shown by the enemy, it struck deeper than any bullet or threat. It forced introspection, demanded recognition of all that he had failed to be, all that he had allowed. In the evenings, the generals awaiting trial gathered quietly in the common room. Former commanders of entire divisions, men who had given orders that cost lives, now playing chess, reading letters, waiting for tribunals that might sentence them to death. Conversations were rare, hesitant, and reflective. On the second night, a younger colonel broke the silence, frustration vibrating in his voice. "They treat us with courtesy," the colonel said. "Why? We fought for Germany. We followed orders. We were good soldiers." Adler looked up from his chessboard. "Would you prefer they beat us?" His voice was quiet, almost deadly in its calm. "They hate us, they should, but they treat us like soldiers. They show us what we were supposed to be. And we failed at being it." The colonel's fists clenched, but Adler's gaze did not waver. "We told ourselves we had no choice. We had to follow orders, maintain discipline. But we did have a choice. We chose comfort over courage, duty over humanity. Now, testimony is our reckoning." A young American guard brought coffee, setting it gently beside him. "Sir, General Patton requested updates on your status. He asks that you be treated properly." Adler's heart sank. Patton, he had not seen him since the first dinner, yet his presence lingered, a ghost of expectation and moral standard. Patton's respect was not forgiveness, it was recognition of what Adler once was, and what he had failed to remain. Adler returned to his quarters, pen in hand, and began a letter to his daughter, Elise. How could he tell her the truth? That the man she believed in, the father who taught honor, had failed countless innocents while convincing himself he was serving a higher duty. He wrote carefully, crossing out lines, rewriting, admitting failure, acknowledging complicity, but also noting that the Americans, through their respect, were showing him the difference between loyalty to evil and true honor. Letters accumulated over months. Responses came from Elise, measured and full of pain, anger, pride, and disbelief. "Papa," she wrote, "you are telling the truth now. That is something. That is more than many men can do." Through these exchanges, Adler understood what Patton had intended with that first salute. Respect shown where none was deserved was heavier than execution. It forced confrontation with failure, demanded accountability, and illuminated the difference between the monster and the man who tried, and failed, to stop the monster.